I'm also going to record the video in case
super smart
our thing breaksies. Are you gonna host it, John? Are you gonna be the host?
Do you want me to?
I don't know.
I was practicing the opening.
Hey everybody.
Hey everybody. Welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name is I'm good to do the intro and outro. See how badly I flub it.
Technically, I put myself on part-time status, so it's yours to take.
Oh, come on. You're the senior member, though.
I don't care. I do not care about seniority. My Tina and I rant about this, about our workplaces with some regularity, that I do not hold seniority in any regard this way.
Yeah. Super not.
That is not the be-all, end-all.
Well, we can see how poorly I do an intro and an outro. And then Kevin will be like, not so easy, is it, huh? Ooh. Always make fun
He's only
of
got
me.
about how many reps under his belt at this point? Several hundred.
Yeah, over 200 because there's like 190
not including
of the regular
the save it for the
episodes,
cast.
and then
yeah.
everybody. Welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name is John Hines, and here tonight I'm with Randall John.
Hey, folks.
And we are running just the two of us today.
Wow.
Kevin is
different voice in that host.
recovering from an illness, so we decided we'd do him a favor and talk about some games without him. But
yes,
tonight we're going to start things off, Randall, with some games that you've been playing.
Yes, which shout out to Kevin. I feel bad because both of these games I think Kevin would be like psyched to hear me talk about in particular. Well, but this is where I'm at, Kevin. Yeah, that's true. Thank you for editing this, Kevin. Appreciate you all. Yes, and we will. I'll probably bring him up again. To be fair, I enjoyed spoilers. I've enjoyed my time with both of these things I'm going to talk about, so it probably won't be the only time.
Nice.
WarioWare Together is a video game that I thought came out recently, but came out in 2021 for the Nintendo Switch. There's actually been like a couple of these WarioWare releases on Switch, and I think they might have even, I might be talking out of my ass to start with, but I think Game & Wario even got some sort of port to Switch because it's a Wii U game, so it can't just live there. But WarioWare Together 2021, it is a WarioWare game in a traditional sense where it is the micro games sort of approach, not too different from original WarioWare micro games or mega micro games. Mm-hmm. I always confuse it because there was the GBA one and the GameCube one, and they were kind of the same thing, but not entirely. But yes, you have the concept of these micro games that you play in rapid succession, and it's just like pick the nose, and you got like 3 seconds to, the fingers moving back and forth, and you got to press A at the right time, and you're either getting up that nostril or you're smashing your face or something. It's wow, and then you go on to the next thing, and you have like 4 opportunities to lose, or you complete the set number of games. Typically, a lot of times that's like 10 or 15 in a given round to get successfully, with like 4 potential misses. Mm-hmm. The cool part about this WarioWare game was a couple of things. First off, this is kind of the first main time for me playing a WarioWare game in a multiplayer context, because for whatever reason, despite my GameCube fascination, I don't actually own that GameCube WarioWare game yet. But after this experience, I'm like, why don't I own that WarioWare game? It's not even expensive for a GameCube game.
How many of the WarioWare games have you played?
Oh gosh,
or owned rather.
GBA, the first one, Touched. I played Twisted. These are all ones that I own as well, and I played those a lot. Twisted a little bit less because the sensor never quite worked right for me. in that GBA. It had kind of like the bigger GBA cart that kind of looked like it had the rumble pack in it, like a few of those GBA games did, but it had like a twist little rotation sensor, but it just never got it to work right. But I think it's also because the platform I played it on, it might have been like the cartridge slot is facing like the opposite direction that they might have expected. I don't know. Yeah. Like playing it on, you could play it on like the DS Lite, or you could play it on that where, you know, the cartridge slot and some of those systems might be in the bottom and some of them might be on the top or whatever, like some of those things. But
oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't even thought about the orientation of the gyroscope being like 180 degrees opposite of what it would be expecting. Yikes.
Yes. And I don't know if it seemed like the sensor was just off anyway. So I just never, I'm like, I want to like this so bad. But Touched was awesome. That was a DS one. I know Kevin likes that game too. Gosh, which other ones did it play?
Because like I've never owned a WarioWare game. I've only ever played them as like, you know, a group thing that, you know, we're going over to someone's house and they have it on Wii or something. But like it was one of those things that like I always enjoyed every time I played it, but I never necessarily enjoyed it enough to buy it myself.
It's fair. Yeah. I mean, it's very fireworks. It's fireworks. It's, you know, popcorn. It is not some super duper deep experience, I would say. It's very, the novelty is all on the front side, right? And it's, you know, if you replay it, it's because, I know this now, like, let me do this faster. And to be fair, part of the conceit with these WarioWare games is like, oh, you think you know this? We're going to add one little twist on it now, or we're going to make you do it twice as fast as you did it the first time you saw it, right? There's conceits like that, but no, I have now pulled up the WarioWare list to refresh my brain. And Smooth Moves, the Wii game, we keep talking about the Wii, and I forgot about the freaking Wii game where you might put the Wiimote on top of your head,
right?
Or you know, things of that nature. It had a really good kind of little light gun element to it. That's what I ended up coming back to the most, is like this mode where I just remember like kind of had a, you know, WarioWare visual kind of Duck Hunt-ish experience. And I remember just shooting aluminum cans and keeping those in the air, and that was okay. And WarioWare DIY, I had that on DS. You could make your own micro games, but the input versus output, it was a little bit of a rough thing there. But like that was also one of the earliest examples of like indie developers making like levels DLC for free for a thing. Like this is pretty cool to do on like DS and WiiWare era, like, you know, 2009-10 sort of territory. Pretty early days for this stuff. And then WarioWare Gold on 3DS is super good as kind of just like a master compilation of like some of the best WarioWare things. I played that one on 3DS a lot. Yeah, and then Get It Together, I guess, was the one that came after Gold. Like, you know, these releases got a lot more sporadic when Game & Wario, the aforementioned Game & Wario, fell on its face in the Wii U era. You know, it didn't do much. I got that for free from Club Nintendo, I think. I didn't even buy that, and I bought pretty much everything on Wii U just because.
Because there was nothing on the Wii U, and you were starved for content. Yes.
Yes.
I also was there.
If you buy it digitally, you get 10% more in rewards MacGuffins or something. I don't know. Get It Together, though. All that to say, Get It Together is sweet because the co-op element is fantastic. You can play the story mode all the way through 2-player, which is super cool. And you're not really, you know, you're kind of both trying to achieve the goal. Sometimes, you know, it's a little bit of the good and the bad in that, you know, sometimes you both have to achieve a given outcome of like escape the area, and you're like breaking blocks in like 3 seconds to try to escape, and one person just barely doesn't make it when one does, and you didn't achieve the goal. Guess what? You lose. You try that over again, you know. So, but when it's like defeat the whatever, or like hit the target, or pick the nose, and only one person has to do it, then whoa, that's kind of cool too. Like it can be like a drinking game or just a laid back game of sorts that way, right? So Tina and I just like burned through this WarioWare Get It Together game in the last like couple of weeks, just over like a few nights of like, yeah, you want to play that again? Like, and the other big thing for me with this is it's not just playing as Wario, and it's not just sets of levels with a certain theme. Like in the original ones, it's like, oh, here's like the retro themed ones. And of course I would be excited about that. In this one, it's more, you're unlocking characters and you're playing as those characters in these micro games. And there's like 20 characters that you can unlock. And it happens in this progression, and they play differently. And then you can get to a point where it's saying, okay, about halfway through, it's like, all right, you've unlocked this many characters. Okay, go ahead and choose 3 characters out of this group of 10 that you want to take with you for this set of levels. Like, okay. And then we both pick like different types of characters with different like, you know, strengths and weaknesses. Like, you know, one character might kind of control like the game Bust a Move, where you kind of have, you know, he can't move himself, but you kind of have like, you know, a cursor of sorts, you know, back and forth across the screen, you know, where, you know, 180 degrees of just like shooting at an angle, and it might bounce off of walls and stuff and hit the target, as opposed to characters that can fly or characters that can shoot straight up or climb on walls, whatever. 20 different characters, and that really added a lot of variety, and they did a good job pacing those unlocks and adding little like cute story interstitials to like make it interesting and not so serious in like a, you know, a WarioWare sort of silly way. If I was gonna ding it for anything, it's more kind of like forgettable 3D graphics, you know, kind of approach, as opposed to the awesome sprite visuals of some of those original games for the most part. But the conceit is like they got trapped into another game, and that game's 3D. But of course, it allowed them to develop this game easier, because it's a much easier to throw out those 3D models, right? But you know, regardless, it plays well enough. It still has that WarioWare soul to me, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really fun game, and we just unlocked kind of a 4-player like party, you know, mode. So I haven't even dabbled in that yet, but yeah, that we went all the way through to credits, so it's pretty cool.
Is this a game that, like, I don't know what age like Fiona is like getting ready to start playing them, but like, is it simple enough that like you can maybe incorporate like her into it as well, or is it still like kind of too difficult for that? Maybe
early levels in a very like, you just play as this character and get used to it context, but I think the frustration might boil over relatively quickly with just how fast and frantic it can be too.
Fair enough.
But at the same time, like the cutesiness and the cleverness and not taking itself too seriously, and even just some of like the juvenile humor, I think would probably go over pretty well that way too. So no, I'd be curious about that. I think probably by the time she would be like, I don't know, 8.
Yeah.
Probably get away with, you know, doing well enough, especially if we were playing all together and most of them weren't, we all have to succeed at this sort of thing. It would be perfectly good though. You know, it's on that threshold.
Nice.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I really enjoy it. I'm glad I own it. I'm glad it marinated on the shelf for a while, and now, you know, it's here and it's good.
Nice.
I'm into it.
Well, I think I'm going to take over for a little bit and talk about what I've been playing, which is a bunch of idle games or some games that kind of spill out into over other genres. But I started off by playing Cookie Clicker, which is a game that I played in browser probably when it first came out as like kind of the idle game. It was one of the first of the genre and kind of the one that kickstarted it as a whole thing that, you know, other people started developing games about. And like, I hadn't played it since it was a browser game, but I bought it on
2013.
Steam. Yeah, it's there is an achievement or an upgrade in it that adds a multiplier based on how many years it's been since it's released. So it is currently at 11%. But
that's hilarious.
Like that is kind of the thing that is worth going back to Cookie Clicker for, is that it is, you know, it sets so much of the template of what idle games would do further on down the line. And like a core part of it is like incorporating things like achievements into the core mechanics of the game. So like the more achievements you unlock, the like more like incremental the percentage of like the more cookies you can click as you do it. So like the game has like 600 achievements, and at one point like there is a full-on achievement that is like, oh, I wonder how long the like character limit is on an achievement, and they just start posting like the intro to a Wikipedia article. Like the humor that is present in all like idle games, because like every idle game does this, where, you know, it takes it to an absurdity, because basically the core mechanic of an idle game is you press a button and the number gets bigger, and then you just try to make the number get bigger faster. And the only way that you're going to keep people interested is if you know, create these scenarios where like you have this increasingly absurd or increasingly complex mechanic. I'm working on like this gardening mini game in Cookie Clicker right now, where I'm like crossbreeding different varieties of like plants that will unlock like higher percentages of like a rate of gain on cookies. But like,
to be cookie ingredients, or just completely separate?
Just completely separate. Then there's also, you know, Wizard's Tower, which allows you to cast spells, and like,
sure.
Then there's a temple,
why not?
Which allows you to like pray to different deities, and they give you like it's the like ever increasing complexity is what makes an idle game interesting to me, because like there is only so much you can do with the core mechanic that you I've talked about the Norp apologue, and the way that like that deals with it is like it has these upgrade trees, but then you kind of get soft locked into these like mechanics that you've like devoted your run into. And then once you get to the threshold that you've set up for yourself as like, okay, well, I can't get any faster than this, so now I have to restart and replan my run from the beginning. But like Cookie Clicker is kind of, you know, it doesn't handle things as complexly like the later titles in the genre do, but it's still a fun play. And like, you know, if this is anything that interests you, I think it's a good thing to see, is like, hey, this is kind of where it all started. Like, I still think in terms of, I don't know, actual quality of what the game has to say, Universal Paperclips is probably my like ideal, just because it is, in addition to being a like free to play like in browser idle game that anyone can access, it is also an incredibly good like societal critique of endless expansion in the pursuit of creating things as efficiently as possible. So, but it's
gaining capital.
Oh, buddy. Yeah. Universal Paperclips is, I think, a masterpiece of a game, and is able to be beaten in 3 days if you're not playing actively and really just kind of letting it run in the background. And yeah, that's part of like playing Cookie Clicker, is like playing it. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to take me a week to do. And I'm like letting it do it while like letting the game play itself while I'm doing chores or doing other things. And like,
I'm assuming you're doing this on the laptop and not on your Steam Deck.
Nope, I'm doing it on the Steam Deck. So Lauren will walk into the room and see, and she's just like, "Oh, you're clicking cookies again." And I was like, "Yep, this is what I'm choosing to do with my time."
Life is finite.
Yep.
That's good.
Only so many things I can do. But
that's amazing.
Other games that I've been playing well, because I've been bouncing between a bunch of different titles. I've been also playing Magic Research, which is another idle game that is using the ideas like, oh, you cast a spell and then your mana recharges and then you can cast another spell. And then after a while, you can get apprentices that can automatically cast spells for you. And then the more you're doing that, it's like, oh, well, you know, you have to have researchers that will research these like schools of spells that you can cast. And it's just, again, the ever increasing levels of complexity. But I think the interesting thing that Magic Research does is that it has like finite capacity for resources. So it'll get to a point where it's like, oh, well, I've conjured up all the stone, but I can't hold any more. So I need to figure out what I can do with this. And like, instead of it just being an ever increasing number of like cookies or whatever the MacGuffin is, like that you're just like ever increasing levels, like this one has like, no, you need to put these things someplace. Like you can only hold so much water. You can only hold so much wood. And so then that like adding the idea of a limit or like capacity, like really does change how you like interact with the idle genre. So like, there's every new title in the genre like does have this new spin to it that I think is really interesting, but if this isn't your bag, then like I totally can see why this isn't interesting at all. But I
don't know. I kind of see, I do see the appeal from like a passive thing. You're keeping the plate spinning while you do other mundane things. And I do understand the appeal there. I do absolutely. I think it's almost a little bit, this is not apples to apples, but it's almost a little bit how some people will leave like the TV on with something they don't actually care that much about watching, but it's like also happening. But it's like this is a little bit more interactive and controllable than that, and it has like an end goal, and that's of course more engaging.
That segues perfectly into what I don't know if this is like a subgenre, an offshoot, how you would classify like the automation genre. Like I've always had, you know, titles like Satisfactory and other things like on my radar, but I've never really played them. And I started playing the game Shapez, which is an automation game, and like when you boot it up, it explicitly says this is not an idle game. Like this is not a game that you're just supposed to let run. And like in working on the game with that framework is really interesting in terms of like how you approach it and like how you also get satisfaction of like letting something run in the background. Because Shapez is a game where you are given these like basic shapes and these basic colors, and then you slowly use different mechanical aspects to cut the shapes, to rotate the shapes, to paint the shapes, to merge the shapes. And then you slowly like do this in an increasingly complexity and deliver the shapes, and figuring out the like mechanics that you need to put into place to turn, say, a circle and a square and the color blue and the color green into like, okay, you need to have a half circle and a half square rotated 90 degrees when like half of it is blue and half of it is green, and using the tools that you have, how do you get this, and how do you then manufacture 10,000 of this shape? And so you are setting up these, it is at one point it is a puzzle game because you need to like set up the assembly so that these shapes can be made. But then after you make one assembly, then you just need to deliver 10,000 of that. But like
mass scale, baby. Like, I kind of see that though. Like I that kind of appeals to me from like it's like a workflow design sort of approach of like, you probably need to, you know, if it's on like a conveyor track, you need to make sure like this comes before this, and it needs to rotate in this angle, and we need to like do it efficiently, and then
as it's doing it like thousands of times over, then you're like, okay, well, at this point in the assembly, there's a roadblock, or it's not moving as quickly as it possibly could. Could I make an adjustment to it and make that part go faster and be more efficient and get it
quality improvement, baby?
But like as you're doing it, like the things are just delivering in the background. So it is kind of an idle game in the fact that like you're having all of these processes go like at a certain level of speed, but like at any given point, you can always optimize a different part of it or make it better laid out or make it more efficient. And like you can go back to a part that you set up at the beginning of the game and be like, oh, this is ugly. Like this is so inefficient. Let me just like reroute everything or reorganize it. But like as you're doing it, it's constantly delivering the things that you've already set up. And like it feels so good to like be stuck on a puzzle where it's like, I have no idea how I'm going to make this shape. I don't know how to start with this. Like there are 3 layers to this. It has 5 different colors in it, and they're all like oriented in a different way. And like, as you're just sitting there slowly, like working out and teasing like the small little steps you need to get to that shape, like all of the deliveries are happening in the background. Everything that you've done before is still happening and is still working. And it's like, it feels so satisfying to be like, okay, it's taking me an extremely long time to figure out this new shape that I need to deliver. But while I'm figuring it out, I'm still accomplishing something because like all the automation that I've done before is happening in the background. And like, it's kind of incredible. Like, and I really need to like play more games in this like automation subgenre because like it is a different game. Like when they say that thing at the beginning of the game, like this is not an idle game. It's like, yeah, this is very much so like a different genre, even though it does share so many things and there's such a huge overlap in like the mechanics. But like the automation, I think is so much more of like a puzzle strategy game.
Yes.
And
strategy is a good thing to call out, I think. And that has a lot of appeal to me. Like some of the work I do gets a lot into like process diagram automation stuff. And I'm just like, I didn't know like there was like games like this that were well designed. And like, to be fair, like Shapez looks cool to me too. Like I like the visual design of this game, even in its simplicity.
And they just
like
came
you
out
said,
with a
even if you
sequel
don't build
too that looks even better. And it's in 3D, and like I think that's a little intimidating just because of like how complex the original gets. But like I think once I get to a point where like, you know, I've done all there is to do in the original one, I was like, all right, yeah, I could totally see myself wanting even more from that.
Oh yeah,
I'm super pumped for that.
I just love that, like, you know, it's not, you have everything you need, it sounds like, to be successful, but it's not going to hold your hand necessarily to get there, but you know you can, and even if you don't have it perfectly, you are still achieving something. Like you said, stuff is still successfully being delivered in the background while you're still kind of tweaking, and like, that's my sicko.
You
for
can
sure.
make
I
the
love that.
ugliest assembly and it'll still work and it'll still like manufacture it. But like that's part of my favorite thing is like going back to a section of the map where it's like, all right, I still need to deliver like 40K of this thing. Like, why is this taking so long? And then seeing something that I built like hours ago and it's like, oh wow, this is terrible. I can make this look so much better now.
Let me apply those principles over here. And like, do you have to do it in like any sort of time frame, or is it just like optimal to have done like these things to be, you know, done, you know, in synchronicity as much as possible, but there's no, they don't demerit you for not, you know, having things perfectly done quickly or whatever.
The only limit is that it's a 4x4 delivery grid where like there's just one module where like everything has to be delivered to, and so it has to be on the edges of that 4x4 grid. And at some point it's like, okay, well, I'm delivering more than, what is that, 16 objects at a time. It's like, all right, I've merged these conveyor belts together so that they're delivering multiple objects, or like I need to deliver more of them and like one specific thing so I can shut down this one, or I can have that go at a slower rate. It's just
yeah, or I'm sure you get into scenarios where it's like, oh, both of these things I need to manufacture both need this like green half circle, and so like
how can I have them both
this way and
assemblies
this way
be on the same line? Yeah, it's great. Man. It's so good.
Jeez.
And I'm pretty sure like the opening map is randomized, so like it's this, I don't think it's infinite, but like it extends so far like into like areas where, you know, the closest objects and colors are like really like it's simple, like here's a circle, here's a rectangle, and then like the further out you get is like, all right, here's a quarter circle, here's a quarter like triangle here, and like I was like, oh god, but that's what I need. That's the closest thing that has this one widget that I need to manufacture.
And you make do. Yes.
And yeah, so you just have like a single conveyor belt going like from the other side of the map. It's great. Oh, I love it.
That sounds incredible. I love the creativity possibilities in something like that.
But
super cool.
100% Lauren looked at this game and was like, I really wonder like why we're together, if this is something that brings you joy.
Lauren's got to know what she got into by this point, right?
Yeah, she knows. I'm a guy who clicks on cookies and makes shapes. But anyway, Randall, why don't you take us home today?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about a retro video game here. I'm going to talk about another TurboGrafx game.
Yeah.
A game that I also probably could have put as my resolution game, but didn't, because I knew I was just stuck on my bullshit. And because my resolution game before was Eastbook 1 and 2, which was also on, Turbo. And so I was just in the habit of firing up the Turbo a little bit more often. I had it hooked up to the TV that was actually hooked up and whatever else. So, what else do I have? Like, Neutopia. And like it actually sprung from I happened to luckily buy one of these mini consoles for the TurboGrafx that got released a handful of years back. Now they go for ridiculous money because like anything TurboGrafx, you can only manufacture about 10 copies legally. That's all that's allowed. So I got one of those and it's hooked up to like one of our like lesser TVs upstairs that my daughter uses, and she was asking about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's turn this thing on. I'll show you some cool stuff on here. And she was like, what's that? And it's like the dragon on this cover of this game. Like, oh, that's Neutopia. I actually haven't played much of that game either, but I've always interested in it. Daddy actually owns this game physically downstairs, but like let's throw it on up here. And the way that I had it rigged up there, it was kind of a little bit laggy and whatever. I'm like, we just need to like actually play this downstairs with the Duo. So did that. And, then she started like asking for me to play it so she could just like watch it. And it's a Zelda clone. It is a original The Legend of Zelda on NES gold cartridge. It's a clone of that game. Neutopia is, but it's good. It's another Hudson developed thing. I should probably confirm that just off the top of my head before I say that for a fact. Do I still have my thing open?
That's fascinating if it is.
Yes.
Because so the
Hudson Soft.
What else did Hudson Soft do like other than like Bomberman at that point? Like,
oh God. So that's the thing is, in this era, Hudson was the Nintendo for this platform to keep it afloat. My God, they developed so much for the TurboGrafx. I should find like a full list of the stuff, but they did the Star Soldier series, and they were involved with Bomberman and all kinds of stuff. Lots and lots for the Turbo to kind of keep it afloat because there wasn't a lot of third-party support otherwise.
Yeah,
not in America anyway. But Neutopia, despite just being a flat-out really a flat out, like almost shameless Zelda clone. Plays very well. Has really great music.
The source material's good. Like, I would
Exactly.
play a million clones if it was as good as like the original Legend of Zelda, which I love the original Legend of Zelda. Like, it's so
Me
good.
too. Yes, that game has that game is near and dear to my heart. The original Legend of Zelda, like a lot of kids of that era, I just saw like, hey, gold cartridge at some like flea market or whatever, and my dad or whoever I was with bought it for me for like no money or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this is actually good too. And got Zelda 2 around that time, like, well, this is way different, but this is also cool.
I would not go to bat for Zelda 2 as much as I would for the original Zelda.
I would not in retrospect either, but at least it did its own thing. It was in a lot of ways
so like bold of a choice,
and it's so moody. That's a moody ass game for the time too. Like, it's kind of dark. But the original Zelda is kind of pretty, like, when you get past like the relatively bright 8-bit graphics is a pretty like, could be a bit of like an isolating sort of like exploratory sort of experience too in its own right. And this game, takes a lot from that, top-down Zelda gameplay, which is also cool too, because once we got past Link to the Past, and I mean, some of those 3DS games, kind of brought it back into the fold, but for a long time, we didn't have any more top-down Zelda type of games for a while. There's some other, games and series that took some aspects of that, but not quite the same of just that, like, open level design back in that era adventure. Like, yes, you probably should do this dungeon first, but no one's twisting your arm to do so necessarily, which is super cool. So that is also Neutopia. There's a little bit more narrative aspect. There's more kind of NPC characters that you're talking to, and they're giving you little hints. There's a lot of secrets in this game, but there is in the original Zelda 2. The original Zelda, I shouldn't say Zelda 2. But there's a lot of like walls to bomb, literally a lot of the same exact concepts. But they make it relatively evident where you need to bomb, at least in the open world. You'll see kind of like outlines of closed off potential doors, and some of them can be bombed open and some can't. And it's a little bit odd at first to get used to, because the first Zelda was kind of like perfect grid, perfect square. You're just this little itty bitty chibi guy in your square with this sword that kind of pokes out a bit, and if you had full life, then your sword lasers across the screen or whatever. But it's in this one, you're kind of almost like two of those stacked on each other, so hit detection can get a little bit to get used to for like the size of your character, but it does make everything look more vibrant with kind of that 12-bit graphic style, and the amount of emoting that you can see more on the characters, and like the uniqueness of the designs. And that's just a minor quibble. You get used to it, I would say. And it's got fire wand that's kind of the equivalent of that kind of full blast sword attack, where it's kind of more of a ranged attack. Like I said, there's bombs, those can also hit enemies, but mostly those are for exploding walls. And sometimes there's walls and you have no idea if they're going to break open or not to a hidden pathway in the quote unquote labyrinths, aka the dungeons, of which there are 8, just like there are in Zelda. That very, very much clone territory. But all that to be said, we already committed to playing it again this weekend. It's like already more than halfway through. We've achieved 4 of the 8 medallions that we need in this game, and you keep getting a better shield and a better set of armor for the new enemies. I would even say the average overworld enemy, in my experience, might be a little bit more difficult than Zelda. But the average boss is easier, which I guess is fine. Neutopia's bosses are pretty easy, pretty straightforward. If you're kind of locked into playing, I've definitely beaten bosses without taking any damage. But it's just, that's fine.
Because
gotta be smart about it.
Like getting to the point in the original Legend of Zelda when you're going up against Lionels. And I would like enter like a single screen and be like, fuck, I need to like, this is what my entire like game is going to be, is like trying to figure out how to defeat this one enemy that's on this screen. Like that's
they brought that theme back in later games too, didn't they?
Yeah. But like also, do you have Neutopia 2? As I just found out about as I was Googling as you were talking.
I literally have a saved search on eBay for Neutopia 2, good sir. And especially when Fiona continues to ask, like, can we play Neutopia? Like, I'm like, oh shit, this is one of the few games I don't have.
I love that you've passed on this generational like awareness of the TurboGrafx to your daughter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you were doing the Lord's work of
that's right.
Carrying
on my sicko.
Anyone knowing about what the TurboGrafx or PC engine is.
It's just so vibrant, and I love all like the cute 'em ups.
So good. Like, I was seeing
just,
like screen caps of it, and I was just like, God, this looks better than like, because I have a lot of affection for like Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons.
Great comparison point.
But like, this looks better than that. Like, it really does. Like, just the extra
it's more powerful.
Colors, like, it's. You know, it doesn't, I wouldn't say it looks as good as like Link to the Past, but like, it does that little in between zone that all TurboGrafx games kind of sit in.
Yes.
Like, it looks great.
It's so fascinating to me. It is. It's that 12-bit.
Yeah.
They never said 12-bit, but I say 12-bit. It's that hybrid point, and it's just like simplicity of controls and like somewhat design is still maintained, or at least like the constraints of the number of buttons and what you can do is still kind of maintained, and it's still in an era where you could take a lot of risks, and games did not take that much money to develop ultimately. And and I just love like it's got its own character, and like I just love how the sound chip sounds in TurboGrafx games like I do in NES and Genesis. Just those eras, I just love that it has its own character, I guess, that kind of carries through.
Like the Genesis sound chip sounds so much different than the NES, but like those kind of are what people think about when they like think about it. So yeah, I honestly don't know what a TurboGrafx sound card sounds like. So like, I think it would be interesting to be like, no, this has its own like personality, and this is exactly what these types of games sound like.
Yes, and there's some pretty good examples. I should think about that. Like, what's the best soundtracks I've listened to? I know on NES we always come back to the Gimmick soundtrack, which is like that Famicom version in particular. It's just like, my God, and it had an extra sound chip, but like for this system to make those sounds and like composed pieces is just nuts to me. Like with limited sound channels, it's bonkers.
Love it,
but. Now I'm way off on a separate branch, I suppose. All that to say, Neutopia is good. I'm probably going to buy Neutopia 2 at some point. I'll probably have to sell some stuff so I don't like completely hate myself for the amount of money that it's probably going to take. And this was the area too where you no longer actually like late era TurboGrafx, when they knew it was like, oh, this thing's kind of like failed, but we have these games that we can localize for not much money. So let's release them with these cardboard boxes a la late era Genesis. But it's just basically like this card, credit card cartridge plus the manual. You don't get the, CD case anymore or any of that stuff. So all that to say, it's even harder to find anything that's like you're sure is authentic or complete in this regard. It's just a fun time.
I was gonna say, you have an analog pocket and all of the other things. I'm sure you could theoretically find a way to play it without having to spend.
Yes. Several hundred potential dollars. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But it's not the same. It is exactly the same, but it's not the same. I don't know. That doesn't. It makes no sense. But it's the way my brain is wired. I don't know.
No.
I just like. if it's a digital collection, I just like I could get one of the EverDrives or whatever, but I just that's not how it works for me. I don't know. Like it just doesn't exist if it's just like a digital list that I could choose from, and I don't know why that is.
No, I get it.
Object permanence. I don't know. Something to do.
It's nice nice to hold an object in your hands.
I guess so.
It really
especially
is.
In this modern world, right? Everything's digital.
Yep.
As I play it on the new version of the system and not even the original, so there's even a blurred line there too. I don't know.
Well, I think we can call it there tonight.
Yes.
I think we've done a good enough job without our fearless leader here. But
yeah, let's pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah. But you can find us online at Pursuing Pixels on any platform and social media platform of your choice. And we hope to see you next time. And until then, take care.
Bye-bye.
It is hard to do the outro.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that sounds terrible.
Wrap it up.